Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théières, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent, il est loin, là je tombe. Nul ne peut nous entendre. Je voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte.
Jonathan Lemire, I want to ask you two pointed questions. If Donald Trump's goal is to be reelected and he views economic strength and the vibrance of our economy essential to that, why not look at the South Korean model or the Chinese model where people were tested, people were asked to leave their family home if they were sick? I mean, why not be more hawkish on some of the things that could help him achieve his political goals?
It's a terrific question. He's obviously changed his stance now a few times. For weeks, he was not taking this nearly seriously enough. And then we had a switch there a week or so ago where he billed himself a wartime president, suggested this might be with us till July or August. That was when they announced the 15-day guidelines for social distancing and for closing of businesses and so on. And it suggested at the time that would be there'd be other measures likely to follow. And instead, we've seen it change the last few days. And it is born out of the president and some senior advisors around him believing that some of these measures are too harsh and that therefore they need to ease up, at least in certain portions of the countries. And that's what we're seem to be heading towards, is that certain areas, some of these big coastal cities, the New Yorks, Los Angeles, parts of the Bay Area, Seattle, and Washington State will be still isolated. New York, at least for the time being, with the strictest measures. And they want the rest of the country, at least portions of it, to start coming back because they've made that calculation. And there's no question. In fact, just a few minutes ago, the president tweeted and said that he believes that it's just the media who is calling for the country to remain shuttered because they're hoping to damage his reelection hopes. There you have it. He just spelled it out for us. His attempts at being reelected, his interest in being reelected, is fueling a lot of these decisions right now. It's about politics far more than public health.
Is there any reporting that suggests he has any connection or affinity for the city he called home for so many years?
He has had a very up and down relationship with the major politicians and elected officials here. Since leaving, taking a step back, since leaving New York to become president, moving into the White House, he's only been back maybe a dozen times or so. This was someone who has spent his whole life in New York, was considered a major homebody. During the campaign, would fly back nearly every night because he loved being in Manhattan so much. He has now turned his back on New York, and let's remember, he is now officially a resident of Florida. He changed that earlier this year, which also was in part due to helping his electoral chances, but also because of the mass protests that he faces every time here and his deep unpopularity in his home state. Your introduction nailed it correctly. His relationship with Governor Cuomo has been very hot and cold during this crisis. It has caught the president's attention how successful, how much credit Cuomo is getting for his daily briefings. In fact, there have been a number of days where the White House task force briefing has delayed its start until Cuomo finishes up. Cuomo, according to our reporting, has figured out, as many do, that flattery is the best way to get to this president. In fact, when he was deeply frustrated with Trump a week or so ago, did a round of interviews praising him before Trump had even really done anything, hoping that Trump would see the interview and then authorize more assistance. And that's exactly what happened.
Mara Gay, you wrote something remarkable before I came on the air. I want to read some of it and ask you to talk to me about the rest of it. You write, what is it like here in New York, now home to more than 7% of the world's coronavirus cases? Eerie, anxious. The schools are closed, so are most stores. Subway ridership is down nearly 90%. Doctors warn that our hospitals are running out of ventilators and medical supplies and are on the brink of disaster. Every day, we learn that someone else we know is sick. Tuesday, I read that Crystal Cadet, a young paramedic I interviewed months ago, was fighting for her life. Wednesday, I found out that an older friend who's like a second father to me has been sick for days. Every day, we worry. We wonder if our neighbors can pay the rent. We go stir crazy. We pray. We wait for help from a federal government we fear may never come. Talk about your walk and your walks across the bridge and your trips to the 9/11 memorial.
Thanks, Nicole. Yeah, I've been doing a lot of walking. There's not too much else to do here in New York. One of the things about what we're going through here in New York City is that many of us live in small apartments, so it's not quite as easy to kind of shelter in place, so to speak. But I've been walking miles. I think Sunday I walked 14 miles and going on a lot of runs. And the only thing keeping me sane, I see a lot of people out, but for the most part, folks are being very responsible, giving each other a wide berth. And I think it's just important because ultimately, New York is suffering because of its density right now in a public health sense. But that's also what makes us who we are. We like living close to our neighbors. We like talking to the bodega owner on the corner. And I think that's part of what makes New York so special. So it's extremely painful to see the city on its knees like this.
Margay, you also have covered Governor Cuomo for a long time. Give me some straight talk about his evolution and really rising to the moment in the view of most New Yorkers.
So I think that the governor has, for the most part, done a very good job. I think this is not so different. We're seeing right now what the country is seeing is the Governor Cuomo that a lot of New Yorkers already know. I mean, I think there's a huge benefit to electing public servants who see their job not just as politicians, but again, as public servants. Governor Cuomo is somebody who has plenty of flaws, but understands how to move the levers of government. He knows how to set up hospitals. He knows how to talk to the president and get what he needs. He knows this president really well. So they've had a relationship up and down, as Don mentioned, for sure, but for years. But, Cuomo is somebody who has spent his life in public service. And I think that gets lost here. I think there's been so much focus on outsiders coming into government, and there's value in that as well. But government is actually an art, and public service is important. And politicians aren't just there for the good times, right? To kind of cheer us on. This is a executive who is sending folks all over the world looking for ventilators for his citizens. And I think he really understands what's at stake, and he's taking it with a level of moral seriousness that you would expect to see and hope to see, frankly, from the White House.
It is Thursday, the 26th of March of 2020, and you are in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. I am your chef de cuisine, Justice Putnam, and our daily special is Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays, a little bit of jambalaya, a little bit of spice in your life. By the way, here, have some cake. We're celebrating inside today. It is my 65th birthday. My, how time flies. Indeed. Well, I made it well past Hemingway, so I think I'm going to be okay. I think I'm going to be all right. And when I say have some cake, I mean the band cake. Yes, my friends from Sacramento used to come into the Bison Brewing Company quite often to play before they hit it big, and they even came back to play when they did hit it big. A great group of guys play a really nice syncopated sound there. I always appreciated it. And so I put up a birthday song. Frank Sinatra from Fashion Nugget seems apropos for the times. And indeed, we will be celebrating inside once again. Everybody wash your hands. Just wash your hands. That's all we can do for now, especially since we got nurses and surgical personnel modifying garbage bags into hazmat suits, because a garbage bag is better than no hazmat suit at all, isn't it? Huh. Yeah, the greatest country in the world. We've tested more than anybody else in the world. Well, this guy just lies. Now, I understand that MSNBC, and maybe even the whole network, NBC, certainly CNN, they are not going to stay with these pressers that Trump's been lying at. They did say that they may cut from the first lie and then come back after he's done lying, which is good, because then we could hear from people like Fauci and, well, I don't know about Deborah. Yeah, she's a scientist still, but I don't know about Deborah. Anyway, back to the matter at hand. I did notice that with great fanfare, many of the news networks cut away from the presser. Unfortunately, it was after Trump had done his lying and he put Pence and the scientists out there to speak. Now, I can understand cutting off Pence. That guy will put you to sleep while he's lying to you, and you'll think it's the truth. At least with Trump, he keeps you awake when you know he's lying to you, even when you don't. Anyway, they cut away before the scientists could really get to speak. So I don't really consider that cutting away from Trump and his presser. Cut away from Trump and come back when the scientists are speaking, and then you might have something there. Almost all of the governors, and we'll be speaking about that also, there's a governor insurrection happening in another part of the world. They call it Brazil. It's very resonant with what's happening here. But we have one governor, a southern state, pro-Trump, is telling everybody to get out of their houses and get back to work. And this is after the numbers came out that the most infections and the highest rates are in Trump country. If you're going to have a coronavirus disco party at one of Trump's resorts, you have to expect at least 5. That's the number they have now, 5 to come down positive with COVID-19. 5. So let's see. 5 infects upwards to 3 or more. And then those 3 infect 3 more. And those 3 infect 3 more, and on and on and on. Next thing you know, you got over 1,000 dead in New York. And you can blame it on liberal policies. No, you can't. What you blame it on is Trump coming in and decimating everything the black guy did, because the black guy did it. What did Vlad and Trump speak about at Helsinki that we never got to hear? We have no idea what agreement they made. Is a payoff being made right now by not attending to this pandemic? As more people die, is my axiom, my sarcastic axiom, actually a truism? Property is always more valuable when delivered vacant to a hostile foreign power. You got to take care of tenants after you've tried to transfer property. You know what trouble you have? It's not so much trouble as it is a burden. And I know many people, when they have property transferred to them, they want the least amount of burdens possible. Deliver it vacant. It will be way more valuable. Trump is fighting for his life. And it looks like the lives of the American people are expendable in the bargain. Well, I've only been saying that from even before the beginning. All right. I keep having the demarcation as when he got kicked out of the Sharper Image. People, at least in New York, knew in 1978 when he had to pay the largest fine in U.S. history for housing discrimination, racial housing discrimination. We know about this guy. Always have. He's a clown. He's a playboy. Oh, the whole idea about trophy wives arose because of this. Cretin. I call him a cretin. Yep, money doesn't talk. It certainly swears. What's on the rest of the menu here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy? Oh, did I tell you? Yes, we do have a $2.2 trillion aid package voted 96-0. Can you? Wow, now that's bipartisanship. But I'll tell you this. If there was any Democratic president sitting in office when this happened, that vote would not be 96-0. We all know that. We all know that. Well, what's on the rest of the menu here? And New York is now the epicenter of the coronavirus crisis in the U.S. Over 1,000 dead this morning, and there's going to be even more tomorrow. It's been doubling by day. Is it possible to have 2,000 dead by tomorrow? God, I hope not. On the rest of the menu in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Gilead Sciences, is it Gilead or Gilead? I think it's Gilead, will not seek a special regulatory designation that allowed it to block competition and boost profits for its COVID-19 treatments. Pandemic profiteering? I think that should be a crime. Don't you? Catholic churches have canceled Easter Mass despite Trump's push for them to be packed because Trump is a Protestant. You don't listen to those heretics. Come on, we're Catholics. And a bomb suspect targeting a coronavirus medical treatment facility was killed when the FBI served a search warrant at his compound near Kansas City. He was heavily armed. We'll just leave it at that. After the break, we move to the chef's table, where doctors combating India's coronavirus outbreak have been evicted from their homes by force over fears that they are carriers. And Brazil's Bolsonaro is facing a governor insurrection after his irresponsible call for life to return to pre-coronavirus normalcy. It was normal before. All that and more on West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit. The bottom of our homepage at netrootsradio.com, placed by Superior Graphic Design, thank you, Tom, is our chat room link, monitored by Kelly Lincoln. It's right there by the social media scroll because, hey, there's meaning to everything in the universe, everything. Thank you, Kelly, for monitoring the chat room link for us, and so much more, by the way. To the leftish of the page, from the chat room link, that just happens to be at the bottom of our homepage, that just happens to be at the very secure netrootsradio.com, you will then hopefully notice the link to our Patreon page. And all kidding aside, we make this plea on a daily basis in this time period because, well, if it wasn't for you, this little powerhouse of resistance would not be able to resist in the fashion that the founders originally intended so many decades ago. And you and your generosity have helped us fulfill that, and we thank you. If you could afford the cost of, say, how about an espresso-type coffee drink once a month sent our way, we are able to stretch those dollars on the quantum level because there's not a crazy quark in existence that we haven't been able to manipulate. That's how experienced we are. So thank you for your generosity. We've been doing this for 9 years now, 24/7, 365 Resistance Radio. And truly, thank you for your generosity. If you would like to follow Netroots Radio on Twitter, it is so simple. You just go to @Netroots Radio. Tom takes care of that, and quite pithily, I might add. I, of course, take care of @Justice Putnam because I wouldn't expect anyone else to. Look, I have a heart, all right? You got to let people go sometimes. You just got to let them be. And I post the show notes and links diary from Daily Co's about 10 minutes before showtime. And then get that linked up on social media. Of course, not on Facebook. Because Mark Zuckerberg and his Fox censors decided that political speech against Donald Trump shall not be allowed on the platform, especially if you use the terms effing Vichy collaborators. Yeah, that's not much. They consider that a threat. Do they think we're going to shorn their hair when all this is done? It's an idea. I don't know if we will. I mean, after all, we're Americans. We just want to sit and watch TV. Now people are watching a lot of TV and they realize how much they hate it. I don't blame them either. Anyway, I post those show notes and links, diary links out there on social media, except for Zuckerberg's platform. You would expect that from a Rada Babe picture message board, wouldn't you? The morality of these people, it's so immoral. Follow the show on Twitter @CookbookWest. And the most important part of this whole spiel, besides the plea for, continual funds so that we can pay the bills, is to pick up podcasts by way of Spreaker, Stitcher, TuneIn, iHeart, YouTube, iTunes. I don't know if I said that twice. But, wherever podcasts can be found, because they're everywhere now. They're so ubiquitous. So. All right, we better get into this. It's my birthday, and I'll party if I wanna. Okay, I'm playing ball inside. Yep, we all should. Actually, I have quite a bit of property here. I mean, relatively speaking, since we live in town, but it's not as if I'm being cooped up and my elderly mom, is being totally cooped up. The weather can keep you in, but the weather has been fairly nice through the midst of all this. And we're able to keep a distance from the neighbors because of the corner lot. So it's like a park, and we can lounge outside under the pop-up tents when it gets a little too bright. Though it's not very warm yet because it's still spring. Indeed. So, I hope your day's going well. You know what? It's David Waldman's stepmom's birthday today, too. So happy birthday to her as well. There's quite a few other people of note that were born on the 26th of March. Wow. I just tell people that I'm an Aries, but for entertainment purposes only. Okay. Only for the entertainment parts. This first offering comes out of the Associated Press by Matthew Perrone. Facing public criticism, the maker of a promising coronavirus drug said it will waive a special regulatory designation that could have allowed it to block competition and boost profits for its treatment. Sorry. I do love the fact that we have reporters being paid for their jobs. I understand that. And I know that editors have to be paid for their jobs, and they have to, set the rules down as according to their style manual. But please, that they could block competition? No, they are going to block competition and boost its profits. There's no could have. My God. Gilead, or Gilead, depending on whether you think it's a GIF or a GIF, said it will ask U.S. regulators to revoke the so-called orphan drug status it received for its experimental drug remdesivir. The status could have entitled the company to financial incentives, and exclusive marketing intended for rare disease treatments. Now get this. Jonas Salk gave his polio vaccine to the world for free. No patent royalties were ever sent to Jonas Salk. Next offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy Metro Shrimp and Grist Thursdays is Out of the American Independent by Josh Israel. Donald Trump suggested that he hopes to see churches packed for Easter in just a few weeks, even as the coronavirus continues to spread across the country. I should say that it's not the coronavirus, it is coronavirus. Because there are many coronaviruses, not just the coronavirus. Let's be clear. Despite this, several Catholic archdioceses are canceling their public Holy Week and Easter Masses, and many congregations are moving them to the internet. Wow, I wonder what Ash Wednesday is going to be like now. As he urged the country to reopen businesses and schools by April 12th, flouting public health recommendations, Trump told Fox News that he chose the date based on his very special relationship with the holiday. Oh, you mean that's when people book rooms in your stupid resorts? Is that what this is all about, Dunny? Yes, it is. Despite Trump's call, the Archdiocese of Philadelphia announced that it would hold no public masses for Holy Week or Easter Sunday. Yeah, but wouldn't it be great to have all the churches full? Trump said. You'll have packed churches all over our country. I think it'll be a beautiful time. Well, Trump really wants COVID-19 to rise from the dead on Easter Sunday and take its rightful place in the pantheons of other spirits floating around in our atmosphere just waiting to choke us to death. In a 7-page directive, the Archdiocese Office for Divine Worship. Look, if you're going to have a spiritual practice, there's nothing better than a bureaucracy for it. I ought to know. I'm baptized a Catholic. It's almost like a blood oath. Yeah. Uh-huh. And you can never get rid of the stain of it. My God. Well, they said all possible electronic and spiritual resources are to be made available to the faithful to enter into these days which celebrate the greatest mysteries of our redemption. Greatest mysteries? Like, how come the Gospels were written, a full 300 years after the fact? What about that? Well, that's a mystery, and you got to be a faithful one to be able to tie it all together. And you know what? They have for quite a few years, too. Think about it. They've gone to war over it. Try to protest? Yeah, you will see about your little protest on the gates at Wittenberg. In a March 17 letter published on the website of the Episcopal Church, Presiding Bishop Michael Curry urged suspension of all in-person gatherings for public worship in most contexts during the sacred time of Holy Week and Easter Day, he said, writing, because this is a global health crisis, the principles in this letter apply throughout the Episcopal Church, including beyond the United States. Oh my God, it's not just the Catholics. It's the Episcopalians, too. There's a trinity of these. Now we need to get the more liberal part of the Lutheran, not Missouri Synod. They'll be Trumpers all the way. You can just count on that. But the other parts of the Lutheran that make up what's known as the triumvirate, when they join forces, I think you'll be live streaming Easter Sunday. ubiquitous anonymous worker bees at this time the Associated Press bring us this final offering here in the Bistro Cafe of West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. A man fatally injured by the FBI was planning a bomb attack on a medical facility in the Kansas City area. Timothy Wilson, age 36, was injured on Tuesday when FBI agents served a probable cause arrest warrant in Belton after a long-running domestic terrorism investigation. And that was a statement by Timothy Langan, special agent in charge of the FBI's Kansas City office. The statement did not detail what happened when agents served the warrant, but said Wilson was armed when he was injured and died later at a hospital, of course. A month-long investigation determined that Wilson was a potentially violent extremist motivated by religious, racial, and anti-government beliefs, according to the statement. He had planned for several months to carry out a bombing and decided to target a Kansas City area hospital using a vehicle-borne improvised explosive. Oh, Timothy McVeigh wannabe, eh? Wilson chose a hospital that was providing critical care during the current coronavirus pandemic and had taken steps to acquire materials to build the bomb in an attempt to cause severe harm and mass casualties, according to the statement. You know, I want to interject real quick here. My sister is part of the medical staff at the major hospital in Grants Pass, Oregon, and they have been shot at while she's been at work. My sister is risking her life. She is 64 years old. She went back to work long before this pandemic started, and now she can't get out, even if she wanted to, because that's the kind of person she is. She's a nurse through and through. And I got to tell you, it's not black people shooting up the buildings around this area in Southern Oregon. It's the neo-Nazi, white supremacist secessionists that do that. And since people are being treated at a medical facility, then that must be where the viruses are. And we got to destroy that and let all the viruses escape. I can't figure out the reasoning in these people's reason, because there is none. The FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force kept close watch on Wilson and was prepared to arrest him when he tried to pick up what he thought was a bomb, although there was no bomb, the statement said. The FBI worked with federal prosecutors in the U.S. Attorney's Office in Kansas City during the investigation, and no further details were released, but I have seen some further news reportage from the Kansas City Star and other local papers that flesh out what has happened here. I prefer these suspects to go to trial, because even though he was set up, there's more of them. There always is. And I wish that efforts would be made for months-long investigations into people who are actually making bombs and who are actually shooting at hospitals, at least here in Southern Oregon. We have our share of neo-Nazi, white supremacist secessionists, and they've been here for quite some time. In fact, they're called Oath Keeper sheriffs. Interesting, isn't it? All right, we better get to our break, and when we get back from that break, we will go through weather from around the world and finish up with the stories that we have curated for you today. You are listening to West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, and we will be right back.
You are listening to netrootsradio.com.
Please hang up and try again.
From a point at sea to the circles of your mind, a new force is at work for planetary transformation. New radio for a new Earth.
This program is presented by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
For an expectant mother, taking care of her developing baby means taking good care of herself. One way she can do this is by ensuring she gets vaccinated. If a woman is or might be pregnant during flu season, it's especially important to get her annual flu shot, preferably before the end of October. In addition, women should be vaccinated against whooping cough during the 3rd trimester of each pregnancy. Failure to get vaccinated places both mother and baby at increased risk for serious complications of these infections, including hospitalization and even death. If you're pregnant or planning to get pregnant, ask your healthcare provider when you should get your vaccines. Thank you for joining us on A Minute of Health with CDC.
For the most accurate health information, visit cdc.gov or call 1-800-CDC-INFO.
This is Scientific American's 60-Second Science. I'm Jason Goldman. Epidemiologists have long known that socially connected individuals, like friends, family, and coworkers, are more likely to transmit pathogens to each other. But when an individual becomes obviously ill, their social connections become temporarily reduced. When we feel sick, we tend to stay away from others. And when we appear sick, others tend to stay away from us. That distancing usually helps to slow down the spread of a pathogen. But not all social relationships work the same way. Parents of sick children will continue to care for those children at the risk of their own health. And that devotion is true beyond humans. Consider vampire bats. They usually groom their own offspring as well as other bats, and they share food. But illness changes some of those activities. To track illness and behavior in a vampire bat community, researchers injected some bats with a substance that triggered their immune systems. The bats felt less well than usual without actually suffering from a disease. In this situation, unrelated bats stopped grooming each other. But mothers continued to care for their offspring, even if one of them seemed to be infected.
In these changes in grooming, there was a difference between unrelated bats and maternal relationships. So what it looked like was that sick moms kept grooming their offspring and healthy moms maintained grooming their sick offspring, whereas we saw like reduction between unrelated bats.
Sebastian Stockmeyer, a graduate student in integrative biology at the University of Texas at Austin, who led the study. But food sharing was different.
So it looked like that sick bats still received food from others, but they were groomed less by others. And so there are these infection-induced changes to social behaviors caused by these like sickness behaviors, but that they might vary depending on what behavior you actually observe.
So not only does the type of relationship matter, the type of behavior does as well. It's as if the bats set up this sick time rule. I'll feed you by regurgitating a blood meal into your mouth, but that's it. The study was in the Journal of Animal Ecology. The social relationships among vampire bats work a lot like human friendships. And when trying to understand the spread of infectious diseases through social networks, says Stockmeyer, vampire bats teach us that the type of relationship and the type of interaction are important variables to consider. Thanks for listening. For Scientific American's 60-Second Science, I'm Jason Goldman.
Hi, it's Tom. Could we humbly suggest your donation to netrootsradio.com? All we've got to run this 24-hour powerhouse of progressive resistance radio is what comes out of our own wallets. And you are our biggest donor. And it doesn't take much, $3, $5. Just go to the bottom of our netrootsradio.com page and hit our secure donate button. Heck, you can even make a recurring contribution. And you'll get a wondiferous pair of Netroots radio stickers for application to your backpack, your bumper sticker, or your banjo. Well, it's up to you which backpack you want to put it on. So donate what you'd like at the bottom of our netrootsradio.com's homepage. Because you are our biggest donor. netrootsradio.com. Together, we are Resistance Radio.
This Civil Liberties Minute, one in a series on the coronavirus COVID-19, focuses on the vulnerable population of persons who live paycheck to paycheck and those who cannot count on a paycheck at all.
I'm Lily Ledbetter, and this is a Civil Liberties Minute with ACLU attorney Bill Newman.
During this public health crisis, it is crucial to ensure that people are not deterred from seeking care. Towards that end, one crucial step that state and federal governments should take is to ensure that people who are sick and or who should stay home are adequately supported. This means income support for workers who don't have paid sick leave. And it means that there should be a guarantee that those persons who cannot or should not report to work cannot be fired. In addition, governments should work with employers and or pass legislation and or implement administrative policies that ensure that workers who voluntarily stay home when engaged appropriately in self-quarantine in order to protect their fellow workers and community members, those persons should receive adequate support or paid leave. Vulnerable populations deserve access to adequate food and medicine, and federal and state governments have a responsibility to ensure that this public health crisis does not take people who live near the financial edge and push them over it.
The Civil Liberties Minute is made possible by the ACLU because freedom can't protect itself.
I'm Rick Smith, and this is Labor History in 2. On this day in labor history, the year was 1910. That was the day that Congress expanded the Immigration Act passed just 3 years earlier. The new language prohibited criminals, paupers, anarchists, and diseased people from entering the nation. During the first decade of the 20th century, some 9 million immigrants arrived on the shores of the United States. Many of these newcomers were from Eastern and Southern Europe. By 1910, 14.5% of the people residing in the United States were foreign-born. The numbers were even higher in the industrialized areas of the North and Midwest. Many leaders in organized labor worried what this large influx of immigrant labor would do to the U.S. labor market. They were fearful that the new workers would drive down wages and impede unionization efforts. Newspapers often used derogatory and disparaging language to describe the Southern and Eastern European immigrants. Public anti-immigrant sentiment continued to grow. In 1924, Congress then passed an even more restrictive Immigration Act. That year, American Federation of Labor President Samuel Gompers wrote a letter to Congress urging them to restrict immigration. He wrote, quote, "Shutting out from our shores the poor of other nations and races is caused by the law of necessity and self-protection consequent upon our industrial system. Labor does not desire to erect a wall around our country and prevent the poor of other nations from entering. It does not declare that America is for America alone, but it does insist that there should be and must be some restriction of immigration that will prevent disintegration of American economic standards." Debates over immigration and its impact on American labor continue to be hot-button political topics.
I read the news today, oh boy.
It's time for Nicole Sandler's What's News from NicoleSandler.com and the Progressive Voices Network.
On the same day that the number of deaths from the coronavirus pandemic in the United States topped 1,000, the Senate unanimously passed an unprecedented $2.2 trillion economic rescue package, with money set to go out to businesses, workers, and healthcare systems. Of course, even after 3 failed cloture votes, there were still a few holdouts and standoffs. 4 Republican senators, Lindsey Graham, South Carolina, Rick Scott of Florida, Tim Scott of South Carolina, and Ben Sasse of Nebraska, had a problem with the provision that gave workers unemployed due to the virus an additional $600 a month on top of their regular unemployment benefits. They were claiming that unless this bill is fixed, there's a strong incentive for employees to be laid off instead of going to work. So they proposed adding an amendment that would limit unemployment benefits to 100% of a worker's salary. Bernie Sanders threatened to block the corporate slush fund portion of the bill if those 4 Republicans didn't back off.
When it comes to low-income workers in the midst of a terrible crisis, maybe some of them earning or having more money than they previously made. Oh, my word, we got to strip that out. Got to tell those poor people that no matter what. By the way, when the McConnell bill first came up, they were saying that, well, we want to give whatever it was, $1,000 or $1,200, but poor people should get less. Well, that was addressed. Now everybody is going to get the $1,200. But some of my Republican friends still have not given up on the need to punish the poor and working people. You haven't raised the minimum wage in 10 years. Minimum wage should be at least $15 an hour. You haven't done that. You've cut program after program after program, and now, horror of horrors, for 4 months, workers might be earning a few bucks more than they otherwise went. Well, needless to say, this is an amendment that is coming up. I don't think it's going to go very far. And if it does go far, I will introduce an amendment to deal with the corporate welfare, the $500 billion in corporate welfare, which is, to me, a very serious problem. But I do not think they're going to get the 60 votes, and that will be the end of it.
Final outcome? That $600 provision is in the final bill. Chuck Schumer also delayed it while language for that $500 billion fund was fixed. You see, a Democratic aide said that the Republicans had left out of the final draft a provision that would force the Treasury Department and Federal Reserve to publish weekly lists of the names of the companies and others financed through that $500 billion loan program established in the legislation. Without this language, the aide said, the information could have been kept secret from the public. So the bill was delayed until the provision was added back at Schumer's request, and a new draft bill was sent around to Hill offices. The two sides had previously agreed to the language. But progressives are still not happy with the final bill, as many see a repeat of a windfall for Wall Street and big business with little to no oversight, similar to what occurred in 2008 with the TARP bailout. Zach Carter, senior reporter at HuffPost, wrote of the bill, quote, "The emergency coronavirus legislation that the Senate agreed to on Tuesday can only be described as an outrage. It is not an economic rescue package, but a sentence of unprecedented economic inequality and corporate control over our politics that will resonate for a generation. It represents a transfer of wealth and power to the super rich from the rest of us with the support of both political parties, a damning statement about the condition of American democracy," end quote. The House is due to vote on it Friday, but since several House members have tested positive for the virus, many are pushing for a voice vote, something unprecedented in U.S. history. Stay tuned. So here's the latest. As of Thursday morning, more than 474,000 people have been sickened worldwide, and over 21,000 have died from the virus. And the areas most deeply in crisis keep shifting. Spain now has more coronavirus deaths than China. Well, than China has reported. Second only to Italy. Japan and New Zealand have recorded their largest single-day spikes in diagnoses. Coronavirus has also reached the UK's royal family, which announced that 71-year-old Prince Charles has tested positive. In the U.S., an epidemiologist says virus deaths could reach their peak in 3 weeks. The American epicenter of the outbreak is New York City, where the number of cases is doubling about every 3 days. U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper has ordered a 60-day freeze on all troop movements overseas to prevent the spread of the coronavirus. The group of 7 foreign ministers held an emergency meeting on the pandemic on Wednesday, but failed to agree on a joint statement because the other countries balked at the Trump administration's insistence on referring to the outbreak as the Wuhan virus. This according to the Washington Post, who cited 3 officials from G7 countries. Representatives of other industrialized nations in the group viewed the term as too divisive for a moment when world leaders need to work together to slow the pandemic. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo said the term was appropriate because the outbreak began in the Chinese city of Wuhan and the country's government didn't warn the rest of the world quickly enough. Unbelievable. Meanwhile, Donald Trump continues bucking the rest of the civilized world and pushing for an end to the nationwide social distancing practices that health professionals say are essential to saving lives. And some of Trump's Fox sycophants have said they'd be willing to die to save the economy. Dr. Anthony Fauci, the nation's leading expert on infectious diseases, spoke about Trump's ridiculous quest to send everyone back to work by Easter.
You've got to be realistic. And you've got to understand that you don't make the timeline. The virus makes the timeline. So you've got to respond in what you see happen. And if you keep seeing this acceleration, it doesn't matter what you say 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks. You've got to go with what the situation on the ground is. So when people say it may take months, I think what people are talking about is how long it takes to go all the way down. But you may see in a relatively shorter period of time when you're seeing the inkling of the flattening and coming down. But, you can't make an arbitrary decision until you see what you're dealing with. You need the data.
And finally, U.S. weekly jobless claims for unemployment compensation were expected to hit a record-breaking $1.5 million for the week ending March 21st. Instead, it was more than double that number, with a truly record-breaking 3.28 million unemployment claims filed. By way of comparison, the previous high was 695,000 back in October of 1982. And that's just a bit of what's news for now. I'm Nicole Sandler. If you appreciate these reports and the Nicole Sandler Show, I really could use your help. My work is 100% listener supported, and due to the crisis, a lot of the monthly subscriptions have dropped off. If you're in a position to help, I hope you will. Please visit NicoleSandler.com and click on that donate button.
Thank you for accompanying us here to the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy, Metro Shrimp and Grits Thursdays. We always begin weather from around the world along the banks of the Rogue River and the Rogue River Valley of Southern Oregon on the west coast of the continental United States of America, where it is currently 38 degrees Fahrenheit, expecting a high of 56. Cloudy early, becoming mostly sunny this afternoon. Winds will be light and variable. Partly cloudy this evening with more clouds overnight, lows in the mid-30s. And tomorrow, cloudy skies, a high of around 54 to 55. Winds will pick up out of the south-southwest at 5 to 10 miles per hour. And then Saturday, we're looking at about a quarter inch of rain and more rain through the weekend. Jackson County, of where I reside currently, now has 4 confirmed coronavirus cases. None have died in this county yet. But we only had 2 the other day. Now we have 4. Okay. Looks like grass pollen is rated at low. The air quality index in the region is good at 28 parts per million, and the daytime UV index is moderate at 5. Barometric pressure is holding steady at 30.17 inches. Visibility is down to 5 miles, and relative humidity is at 92%. Weather from around the world is brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Alrighty, London is 55 degrees and sunny. Paris is 52 and sunny. Rome is 52 with a rain shower and a flood warning, a flash flood warning, by the way. Kyiv, 51 degrees and fair. Kabul, 48 and mostly cloudy. Hong Kong, 71 degrees and fair. Tokyo, 53 and clear. Sydney, Australia, 65 with a rain shower. San Francisco, California, 41 and sunny. And New York is 46 degrees Fahrenheit and sunny. And oh, did I mention? There's a forecast for coronavirus everywhere in the world. And that is weather from around the world, brought to you by people's personal weather stations that they purchased. These people planted these purchased personal weather stations somewhere on their property, and these people positively live around the world. Maria Kalra and Divya Ghoshal of Reuters bring us this first amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Some doctors combating India's coronavirus outbreak have been evicted from their homes by force, a medical association said, due to fears that they may be infected and will spread the disease to neighbors. The country went into a 21-day lockdown yesterday, Wednesday, and experts have said it faces a tidal wave of infections if rigorous steps are not taken to keep the virus in check. India's public health care infrastructure is poor, and it suffers from an acute shortage of medical staff, who will generally see many patients over a short period. Some doctors in temporary residences had been forcefully evicted by their landlords over infection fears. They are now stranded on the roads with all their luggage, nowhere to go across the country, the association said, which represents 2,500 doctors. And they said that in a letter to the federal home minister urging the government to intervene.
Je te donne ce mon amour pour la vie entière, la promesse de me trouver à tes genoux. Aussitôt que tu m'appelles, rester toujours fidèle, c'est tout, c'est tout. Je te donne tous mes printemps, mes étés de mer, mes automnes quand les feuilles tombent partout. Si ce n'est pas une bonne affaire, je te donne tous mes hivers, c'est tout.
Mauricio Savarese and David Biller of the Associated Press bring us this final amuse-bouche here at the chef's table at West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Brazil's governors rebelled against President Bolsonaro's call for life to return to pre-coronavirus normalcy, saying his proposal to reopen schools and businesses runs counter to recommendations from health experts and endangers Latin America's largest population. State governors, many of whom have adopted strict measures to limit gatherings in their regions, defied Bolsonaro's instructions in a nationwide address that they lift the restrictions and limit isolation only to the elderly and those with long-standing health problems. The governors were not the only defiant ones. Virus plans challenged by Bolsonaro were upheld by the Supreme Court. The heads of both congressional houses criticized his televised speech. Companies donated supplies to state antivirus efforts, and even some of his most staunch supporters joined his detractors. Well, that brings us to the end of our broadcast period for the day, but you do know that Netroots Radio will broadcast on, and we're going to meet up tomorrow for Blue Moon Spirits Fridays. So do stay tuned to Netroots Radio all day and all night for all the breaking news as it breaks, and we'll meet up here tomorrow, right here in West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy. Bon appetit.
Je voudrais du soleil vert, des dentelles et des théères, des photos de bord de mer, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je voudrais de la lumière, comme en Nouvelle-Angleterre. Je veux changer d'atmosphère, dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma fleur sous la pluie de novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de t'attendre. Les années passent voudrais du Fred Astaire, revoir un latte Goël. Je voudrais toujours te plaire dans mon jardin d'hiver. Je veux déjeuner par terre comme au long de golfe clair, t'embrasser les yeux ouverts dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ma robe à fleurs sous la pluie d'un novembre, tes mains qui courent, je n'en peux plus de retendre. Les années passent, il est loin l'âge tendre, nul ne peut nous entendre. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Ba-da-da-dum-di-da-dum, 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 dans mon jardin d'hiver. Dans mon jardin d'hiver, dans mon jardin d'hiver.